I'm going to call to order the work session for the Cochise County Board of Supervisors. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. We're meeting at the Board of Supervisors hearing room on Melody Lane in Bisbee, Arizona. Pursuant to ARS 38431.02H, the public will have physical access to the meeting room 15 minutes prior to start. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion. Members of the public may also attend this meeting via Microsoft Teams. Work sessions are a time for the county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comments will not be taken at this meeting. Roll call, we'll start with District 1.
Crosby is here.
District 2.
Gomez is here.
District 3, Antonori is here. All members, supervisors are present and in person. And we will begin with introductions of everyone at the table.
Larry Smith, architect with DLR Group.
Karen Chin with Chin Planning.
Gary Rattel, architect with DLR Group.
Jacob Bruce, architect, DLR Group.
Phil Bourdon, Cochise County.
All right.
Sharon Gilman.
Sharon Gill. Yeah, and everybody knows us. So what we'll do is we'll start out with our first agenda item is a presentation by Ms. Chin.
Just dive right in. You can put it up on the screen, or does it just help everyone? You've got all of these.
Yeah, but we need to put it up so the public can see it.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, you already went through introductions, although we don't have Adam's picture up here, but this is our team right here. Pardon me?
Oh, can't hear.
Oh, maybe get
microphone.
Pull the mic out of front of you.
Sorry.
It's stuck, I guess. That's as much as it'll go.
Is that good? Oh, you're now. Can you hear?
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes, right here.
Oh.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yep, another one. Anybody needs that?
Okay. That's the introduction. Just to let you know that I've worked with this team before, and I've been doing this jail planning work across the country for about almost 43 years. So I'm very happy to be able to work here in Cochise County. And what I want to do say is that we're going to go through about 20 slides on the data and system assessment. Is there a clip thing, or should I just lean over now? You can hear? Okay, I'll just talk really close. But we're going to definitely have the Reader's Digest version today, because we're going to try to keep this to 30 or 40 minutes so that we can get some good conversation and questions. But we will be issuing a draft report at the end of April, early May, and that will have all the information. So again, for the purpose of today's briefing, I tried to get it down to something that was more reasonable to keep our presentation a little bit shorter. So let's just dive right into it. And the first slide that I have here, as you know, as I'm sure from the contract, it's a planning study. So we're looking at the entire criminal justice system to be able to inform decisions about future need for jail capacity, because obviously the jail is the big project here. And then also developing the space program for the jail. We were also asked to look at a space program, what would be the future need for a court and sheriff's office, so that if you ever wanted to add that to a site, you would know what the square footage requirement is. And then finally, we're going to go through site issues that we've, site selection criteria, and the 6 sites that we've been given to look at as part of this project.
And who gave you those 6 sites? Oh, you did. Okay.
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 Exactly. All right, so just starting, I'm going to go through the system assessment. And the first slide that you see here is just kind of a compilation of my many years of doing jail planning across the country about what are the factors that impact on your criminal justice system. Because these are things we need to look at very closely in terms of developing projections and seeing what kind of future you're going to have here in Cochise County, what would be the size of the jail. Many people think it's just strictly crime and arrest trends that would dictate what's needed for a jail. But what I have found, there's many other factors, like is it a growing population or is it a declining population in the county? Many of the social and economic factors that we know drive the jail population in terms of homelessness, mental illness, substance abuse, other factors that work their way into the criminal justice system. I took a very close look at those in the jail as well as throughout the court system. Crime and arrest trends, I have information on that, and I'm going to be summarizing it. All the law enforcement, judicial, prosecution, defense, all that's going on in those departments within the criminal justice system, certainly probation and parole, because probation is a big part of the justice system. We're going to look at some data on that because that will inform decision-making about the future. Bond setting practices, pretrial, other services that might screen people to not be in the jail but to assure their appearance in court, those kinds of things. And also looking at Availability, if in your community you have these resources for local treatment and rehabilitative programs like mental health and substance abuse. So when people get either in the jail or out of the jail, are you able to assimilate them back into the society and they're not coming, the revolving door that happens in a lot of jails. So these are just some of the things that I always put at the beginning of the assessment and say, now I'm going to go through the data that I've collected on those factors and see what they reveal in terms of ultimately coming to develop a forecast for a future jail in Cochise County. So the first slide here, there's a series of slides on, let's look at what's happening for the population. And the population in Cochise County by the 2020 census was about 125,000 population, and it's projected to grow to about 130,000 population by 2040. And this takes a look at, so it's about a 0.5% per year growth in the county. But I think it's important to look at, where is the population? And this little pie chart shows that Sierra Vista is projected, it'll represent almost 37% of the population by 2040. And then the unincorporated areas is about another 39%. So it just gives a sense when we talk about location of a future jail and other criminal justice factors, where is your population living and where is it projected to be living in the future? And this graphic takes a look at, all right, let's look at crime and what's been happening in crime in Cochise County. And reported crime is broken down, crimes against person, crimes against property, and crimes against society. Crimes against society are lower level offenses. Obviously, crimes against person, someone's been hurt, property is property crime. You can see here on Cochise County, the actual crime decreased by about 5% per year between 2017 and 2023. So you've had a decrease in reported crime. When you get to a point of arrest, now someone's been arrested and you have a lot more information. And as it relates to arrests, though, the annual decline in reported arrests in Cochise County is about 4.9% per year for the year that I was able to obtain the data. So you've had both a decrease in crime and a decrease in arrests over the last 5 to 6 years. And that's not uncommon, even in a place where a population of a jail is growing. As we get into many of the arrests are for lower level offenses, what's called Part B offenses, that are very difficult to get people out of the jail when there's the kind of factors we just talked about, substance abuse, mental health, homelessness, drug addiction, all those kinds of things. It's very difficult to get people out of the jail to be able to stay out of the jail. And that's the majority of your arrests here in the county. And I'm going to summarize all this data at the end on some bullet points. But crime and arrests are down in Cochise County. The next thing I took a look at is what about the Superior Court. And of course, the Superior Court has many other filings besides felony filings, but this graphic looks at felony filings in the criminal court. And while crime and arrests are down, felony filings are actually up, and they're up about 6% per year for the time frame you can see right here. And felony filings in the Superior Court, that's about 30% of their work. The other, there's civil, there's misdemeanor filings, there's probate filings. But a good third of the chunk of work in the Superior Court is felony filings, and that's going to have the greatest impact on the jail population. So the trends in that, felony filings are actually up. Interesting enough, but smaller numbers, mental health filings in Cochise County increased 14% per year between 2013 and 2023. And I'm seeing this in other counties that I'm working in also, that while the felony filings are up, there's a substantial increase also in mental health, which, again, we're going to come back to that factor many times when we talk about the jail. Well, oops, I went back too far. This graphic is a little hard to read on the screen, but if you can see it on your papers in front of you, what are the actual criminal caseload filings in a Superior Court? And when I get a list of what was the actual filing for and the percent, drug possession, paraphernalia, and sales were the most frequent case types at about almost a third, 33.5% of the filings, and that was in the year 2023 when I had a profile of that. And then other assaults was the second most frequent case filing type. So again, looking at the issue of drug and alcohol and paraphernalia possession, that's going to play its way out through what they're arrested for, the filings in the court, and we look at the jail profile, we're going to see that as a very common factor. Manner of sentencing from the Superior Court, I think, is really important to take a look at because in the years you can see there was no one was sentenced to death here in Cochise County. There's been a decrease in the number of people that were sent to the Department of Corrections. It was about 477 in fiscal year 2019, and that dropped down to 103 in fiscal year 2023. Overall, manner of sentencing has gone down by about 13%. But there's one really important item to look at here, and that is probation, because probation represents about 68% of the outcome. And that's typical, that probation is a big part of the engine of the criminal justice system. And so I always look very closely at how probation is working and the number of violation of probations that make their way into the jail, because probation is, most people are not sentenced to corrections or the jail or to death. Most people are placed on probation supervision when they come to the majority through the criminal justice system. Okay, the next one takes a look at the filings by location, to get a sense. I do these pie charts, again, on the location. And what you see here is that about 30% of the felony filings in the year of 2023 are coming from Sierra Vista. The filings are coming from residents in Sierra Vista, about 22% from Wilcox. And so, again, the two biggest ones are Sierra Vista and Wilcox. And then the majority of the case types in the other areas are more civil or traffic or other kinds of cases. But those are looking at the total filings in the justice. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong graphic. This is justice court filing. I took a look at, of all the justice courts, the 6 you have, where are those filings coming from? So again, the majority is Sierra Vista, followed by the Wilcox Justice Court. And the other ones make up anywhere from 3 to 18% of total justice court filings. And the other function of the Justice Court, of course, is to look at, that doesn't work, is their initial appearance.
Not working.
Point at the bottom.
Oh, I've got like negative 3D. Try it and see if it works.
Battery dead.
Oh, it's, well, yeah, it doesn't seem to.
They can advance the slides. That are ready.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So the next slide, we'll look at the initial appearance. Okay. Because a very important function, is, particularly as it relates to the jail, is the justice courts are doing the initial appearance, they're doing the initial bond setting. And so what you can see here is that Sierra Vista, again, it's about 37% of all initial appearances. And the justice court's appearances increased by about 53% in the 4-year period. A few of them, like the Bowie Justice Court, is very small. They only had 24 initial appearances in the last fiscal year. And then the big one, again, is Sierra Vista at about almost 38% of initial appearances were through the Justice Court in Sierra Vista. Next slide. These graphs get into now detailed information about the jail population. And what's really important in looking at a jail population is that how many people are in jail is only a function of how many people you put in there and then how long you keep them. I mean, there's other factors that why they're staying that long, but I always look at average daily population, average monthly admissions, and then calculate average length of stay. So what you see here in the first graph is average daily population, going from about 273 inmates on a given day in 2014, and then about 298 by the end of third month in 2024, but I've annualized that data. There was a blip, you see, in 2022 and 2023 where the jail population went as high as 314 to 335, and that's average daily population for that year. And so that's about a 9% increase for that 10-year period. And obviously it peaked in those 2 years. The table below it is monthly admissions to the jail. And monthly admissions has gone down by about, 12% for that same period. And you see, if you standing up there and graph, you've got average daily population going up, but you've got admissions coming down. There's fewer admissions per month. And you say, well, how does that make sense that you would have more people in the jail and you're admitting fewer? And if you go to the next slide, kind of the key of what's kind of driving the population here is the average length of stay has gone up. And it's drastic when you say, okay, on average it's 16.4 days and now it's gone to 20 days. But that's average daily population of everybody coming in and out of the jail. They're there and they immediately get released, or the people that are staying there for over 200 days. So average daily population is a good factor to look at for an overall metric, but I did further digging with certainly the wonderful assistance of the Sheriff's Department to get more qualitative data, like who's there, for what reason, for how long. But this just shows you one thing that's very important. is that here in this county, length of stay, an increasing length of stay is driving the population more than how many you're admitting, which makes sense. Again, crime and arrest is actually down, but the issue of driving an increasing population is length of stay, which in many ways for your county is a good thing because there's many ways that length of stay can be, you can intervene in that in terms of doing some pretrial supervision, putting people on monitors to assure their appearance in court, expanding mental health and other kinds of social services. You've got some in the jail now, which are really good, or the population would likely be higher, but even to expand those, in other words, whatever is going to keep inmate population there for a shorter period of time is going to have an impact on having a bigger jail or a little bit smaller jail, a reduced jail capacity will be needed in the future.
Chairman Antonoy,
Well-
this is Commander Bradshaw.
There's somebody online.
Oh.
Somebody.
Chairman Antonoy, this is Commander Bradshaw.
Commander Bradshaw.
Oh, Commander Brett.
Okay.
Yes, just a point of clarification that the numbers that you're looking at that Ms. Chen is showing you is a compilation of all three jails combined because
Oh,
we
yes,
moved
okay.
them back and forth all together. So
Oh, okay.
Yes, very important. Thank you for that, Commander Bradshaw. That is the total jail population, and you've got,
The Wilcox Annex
yeah,
and then the
yeah.
Douglas.
And Douglas
Yeah,
there.
right, yeah. Yes, it does. Well, just to sort of summarize in one page, bullet pointed on 14, about the jail and who's in there, the profile. That was just kind of the metric I showed about average daily population and admissions and length of stay. But in taking a closer look and with the assistance of the Sheriff's Department of a profile on a particular snapshot day, about 82% of the population was in pre-tout status, which you'd expect. A jail is supposed to be the short-term holding, and then you find out if they're going to go on probation or go to prison or whatever. So it's 82% is pretrial. The average 30% were age 30 to 39. In terms of arresting agency, Sierra Vista in Cochise County Sheriff's Office accounted for over half the arrests that led to taking them into the jail. And in terms of where the inmate population reside, Sierra Vista and Douglas accounted for almost half of the jail population. What's their place of residence?
If I could just ask a question on that.
Mhm.
I remember talking to the sheriff, or maybe it was Commander Bradshaw. A lot of the people that we were scarfing up, especially related to human smuggling, were not from Cochise County. Is there a number that?
Yep, I do have a number, but I don't have
Yeah,
it because there's again, this
When
is
you,
where
break, when you break this residency out, I mean, that's not necessarily.
there was one that
That's what I'm getting at. Is it where they were arrested or where they actually physically reside? Are they?
no, that I have arrested and I have where they reside. So there's that
okay.
two things. But I will tell you right now the answer to that because again, I had to select some slides to take out. Residency, this is for a snapshot profile that was done on October 3rd. Residency, where they reside, 33% Sierra Vista, 14% Douglas, 7% Benson, 6% Wilcox, 5% Tucson, and then 35% other.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's a lot. Yeah,
Out of the county.
out of the county. Yeah.
Well, it could be some other, you're not incorporated, not Douglas, Benson, Wilcox. I was trying to develop see where the chunk,
Oh, you're talking about they could still be in the county, but it's unincorporated?
yeah, it just says, I just call that other.
Well, that means, is it other from California? Is it other from Mexico? Is it other from, we don't have that?
I don't have that. I could follow up and do another
Oh, I
profile,
was just
but
curious because I just want to know what the impact we are
Yeah.
suffering from things going on with
Yeah.
the border and with, folks coming into Cochise County to commit crime from other states and stuff.
well, it's going to be a combination of other unincorporated areas and other. I was looking at where's the majority, where's 60 or 70%, and they are coming obviously from this county. But in that category called other, I will see if I can do.
Yeah,
a
I'm just
snapshot
curious to know how many
Yeah.
are actually Cochise County residents.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. The most frequent length of stay was 26 to 99 days when I did a snapshot of how long people had actually been in the jail. Now, we're not talking about average length of stay, of booking in, booking out, or what the metric like that. We're talking about in one day, let's look at who's been in this jail for how long. And to me, that's always a good indicator of, if you've got people staying a really long time, what's the reason they're staying that long? Is it a slowdown in getting them before the court, a violation of probation, which if they violate and they go to jail, they don't set a probation hearing for at least 30 days. If you are picked up on a warrant, you're automatically put into the jail, and even if didn't appear in court, so a warrant was issued, and even if it was a lower level offense, it's a warrant, you're going to go to jail. So there's categories, again, that could be looked at in the future to say, do we want to do some things differently that will help, bring
Reduce the
population?
population.
Yes, exactly. The most frequent bond was set at $10,000 to $50,000. And we do know that there's been a lot of press around the country in the last 10 years about the issue of cash bail. And there's a lot of people, they don't have a 10% to post a bond of $1,000. They tend to stay a very long length of time because they can't bond out. Even if bond has been set, they don't have the financial ability to bond out. Let's see, warrant was the most frequent offense, followed by drug possession at 13%. In other words, they were supposed to appear in court, or a warrant, didn't do what they're supposed to do on probation, a warrant was issued, and they're automatically booked into the jail. And that's just a little bit of a profile. And I will follow up on that 35% to find out exactly other areas of the county and what was totally out of county for residency. This just shows on slide 15, the next slide, a deeper dive on who's staying in the jail longer than 200 days. So when I did that first snapshot, I had a percentage of people staying more than 200 days, which is a long time to stay in a jail, obviously, when the idea is, except if you're there for murder, rape, or robbery, the court processing takes a lot longer, but that's not the majority of who's in your jail. So why are people staying there for 200 days or longer? Sex offense charges was 12%, and then warrant was at 11% of people that were staying in the jail in excess of 200 days. And then many of them had multiple charges. You see on the last category, other, it wasn't just one charge. It was a combination of, and they're listed there, anything child abuse, false reporting, resisting arrest. But you also can see on here, for the ones that were staying over 200 days, it was only about 2% for violation of probation. So even though, probation, they maybe have to wait 30 or 60 days before they had their probation hearing or revocation hearing, that's not really driving. It is some serious offenses, more serious offense like manslaughter, aggravated assault. But you look at the category of drug possession and drug sales, that's, again, about a quarter of who's staying in it. So that common theme of substance abuse, drug issues, homelessness, and mental illness is a common theme to the criminal justice system. Well, I'm talking fast so we can get some good conversation going here. Just the next two slides is succinctly with other data tables that might not be in here, but they will be in your final report, where I summarize what I say the system assessment. So the population in this county, it's grown, it's had a very modest growth, and it's only projected to grow by about, going from 125,000 to 130,000. So it's not a fast growing county. Crime and arrests, both reported crime and reported arrests, are down about 5% per year in Cochise County. And over half of the arrests that are made are for what's called the Group B offense, which is lower level offenses having to do with gambling, prostitution, offenses, but they're lower level. It's not murder, rape, robbery. Those are called the Group B offenses. The Superior Court filings, they've increased overall by about 1% per year. But the biggest one, criminal felony filings, has increased by about 6.5% per year. And then again, the criminal felony filings in the Superior Court, that's about 30% of their workload. You can see they have other, obviously, domestic relations, mental health, and civil and probate and such as that. So about a third of their activity is related to things that would directly impact on the jail. But then over half, or no, not right at half, 48% of the Superior Court criminal felony filings are for one of the following charges: drug possession, paraphernalia, sales, public order, DUI, DWI, and motor vehicle charges. So roughly half of almost half of the felony filings in the Superior Court are for those offenses. And in the manner of sentencing in the Superior Court is predominantly, almost 70%, the outcome is they're placed on probation. Justice court case filings have grown minimally, like less than 0.5% per year. And Sierra Vista and Wilcox were the majority of those at 52% of the case filings. And then Bisbee and Benson Justice Courts show the greatest growth in initial appearances, and that's, again, the bond setting practice between 2020 and 2023. They were about 30, those two justice courts combined were about 36% of the initial appearance filings activity by the Justice Court. I have a lot of different graphs about the county attorney and the legal defender. They're not in this presentation, but I can tell you this. The county attorney has felony and they have a lot of diversion court programs. There, you don't have a mental health court, but there is some misdemeanor diversion program. They just received a grant, I think, last year for $500,000 to do other diversion programs, which is what you want to see. That's if you can divert, you do, and they've got success, not with all of them, but they will complete their whatever the particular program is. The public defender and legal advocate, they represent about 68% of the cases that are assigned for defense, and your contract attorneys are about 32%. And I know I've read previous studies that it's a problem with getting adequate and immediate representation and having to bring lawyers in from outside of this area. And so hence about a third of your cases are handled by outside, not by the public defender or the legal advocate, but by outside counsel that are hired. The probation directly supervised, there's about 800 to 850 cases that are directly supervised. And although probation revocations have come down since 2019, overall, from 2019, there was a push about, I think, in 2021 to start looking at probation statewide because so many people were being revoked on their probation. So Cochise County did from 2019 to about 2021. That was a big period of growth, and they have brought revocations down somewhat, but there's still at least 143 revocations that you had in 2023. Those revocations would all initially be filing through the jail system. And also, you saw from the profile, a high percentage of the jail population have charges that were violation of probation. So that's one thing in terms of looking at what could be done differently in the future to reduce the jail population. And then this last summary point on the jail is that the average daily population in the jail has remained pretty constant at 250 to 300 inmates. A little bit of a blip in 2022 and 2023. And admissions are down. And then again, average length of stay is what's really driving increase in any jail population. And then I covered the length of stay, and I will follow up on the residency. I do think an interesting other piece, though, is that in a profile recently in end of 2024, inmates seen by psychiatric providers increased 86% in 2 years. And 20% of the inmate population right now is on psychotropic medication. So we're going to go back to those issues of, and not uncommon, by the way, it's not just Cochise County. This is what I'm seeing in the profile of jail population across the country. But that's a pretty substantial increase in that population. So to summarize, just want the key findings of all looking at that data, and again, 100 other slides. It's here, and you guys have sat through some of those presentations, but they will all be in the draft report. But in terms of the system assessment and looking at data, these are my bullet points on that for key findings. There would be a cost benefit to co-locating criminal justice services. I mean, depending on but that's what you choose to do. But many of those agencies work together. There's cross boundaries. Maybe it would even be, there's the same population is filing through, the court and the jail and the probation. And so overall efficiency and consistency could be enhanced by co-locating services. The other kind of key takeaway is Sierra Vista is the majority of everything related to criminal justice activity in the county. It's got the most reported crime, reported arrest, reported court filings and proceedings, probation caseloads, and it's also the majority of jail admissions and daily population. So just looking at that for any decider factor on future Sierra Vista, and it's also, of course, the majority of the population. Mental health and substance abuse populations are prevalent in the criminal justice system. Considering the high levels of these population service needs, specialized services will be needed in an expanded jail facility and you've got some great workers doing the best they can in an antiquated facility now. But in the program, you're going to see in the square footage for a new jail, there will need to be substantial a housing unit or two that will handle the population of mental health and population, because it needs to have a special kind of environment, and it needs to have specialized staffing to keep the whole jail safe. Right now, you've got, I think, 6 cells that are, just where they're located and how they are just exacerbates everything about mental illness. So because of that prevalence in the system, there will be a need to have specialized housing in the new jail. Then just the last bullet points to say, okay, expansion and enhancement of the criminal justice service and alternatives that could have the greatest impact on future population requirements would be enhancing pretrial screening. In other words, if someone is brought to the jail, a pretrial screening, and just to assure their appearance in the court, maybe put electronic monitor on. So expansion of electronic monitoring. A lot of jurisdictions around the country are doing that because the cost per day of an electronic monitor, $10 or $15 or less, is way less than a cost per day of being in the jail. Validation and adherence to a uniform bond schedule. Right now that you have 6 justice courts setting bond, it's really important to have a fair and equal system of justice, that if this is the offense, this is the bond. If this is the offense, this is the bond amount that's set. And there's some discrepancy in that. Increased diversion in specialized courts. You used to have a mental health court, and now you have some mental health diversion, but I've seen that mental health and also drug courts have been very effective in working with people to keep them out of the stream longer term than just a stint in jail. The data systems and reporting. Well, one thing about the jail, even for having initial appearances or having any court proceedings by video, the jail is not adequate to be able to have, the right technology in the jail. And so sometimes if there is a court appearance and they can't get someone, there's not a room available, or the video stuff goes down, it's going to have to be deferred to another court date. And so that's something in a new jail that will have good technology and good ability to do both in-person and video appearances, really important. And then also expansion, reduction of the standard length of time on probation. Right now, in talking to probation, the standard sentence is 3 years, but many people are on probation for 5 to 6 years. And that period of time, it's according to the desktop guide for good probation practice, it should be shorter and targeted, and hopefully with some services wrapped around it. Not wait until there's a violation, a dirty urine, or they weren't where they're supposed to be, or whatever the violation is, because then they're going to be in the jail, and they're going to be in the jail for a while. And also to really expand mental health and substance abuse service in the jail. They need to have staff for that, but you also have the right space for that. In the program that I'm going to review quickly on the jail, will be in this new jail program a initial appearance court. So that's going to really help, and it'll be laid out to be able to do when someone's booked in to have that initial appearance, and whether you have it video from the justice courts or you decide to assign that task of doing initial appearance to one justice, however that's going to be decided. But you're not going to have to drive people around, and also for the ERC, the Early Resolution Court, which Phil and I sat in one time, and they're bringing people over, transporting to the courthouse. They're sitting in I'm just drew a blank on what they call where people sit that are the jury box. They're sitting in the jury box in handcuffs, and it's not a very secure way to get them into the courthouse either. But I have programmed in the new jail an early resolution court, because 75% of cases in Cochise County are resolved through the early resolution court. So instead of taking them around to courts or whatever, or taking them wherever the jail might be located, it makes sense to have that court in the jail. Well, let's get to the next thing, the forecast. I developed several forecasts of jail population looking at average daily population and pattern growth to say, taking out those 2 blip years of a little over 300, what would the population be? By a percentage increase, by a number increase. I also looked at jail population as a ratio to population in the county, and then as the county is going to grow, how many beds would that be? And when I do a population forecast, it's based on average daily population, and then I have to add to that a factor of 20%, because you can't just plan a jail for your average daily. because sometimes the population goes up and down. So I tracked very closely what was, I call the peaking factor, the average daily population data that I did collect. And you also have to add on, because just because you admit someone to jail, they can't go to any empty bed. Males and females are typically separated. Various levels of security are separated. So you need to have some additional beds. So when you see on this table where to every forecast I've added 20%, because I'm using the data, average daily population, and then I'm adding beds on to account for the peak in classification. Then I also modeled, you see the higher numbers. I said, well, what if the growth pattern that happened in 2022 and 2023 when you were at 315 or 330 inmates, that's a much higher growth, and that's going to give you in the out years a much higher jail population. And then finally, the last estimate said, I take your 10-year growth pattern, but then I'm going to say, is it possible, and I think it is, that in that 10-year growth pattern, you could have a 10% reduction in jail population by implementing many of the things that are successful around the country in reducing population. And so that's going to give you a lower number. And so based on the projections and the forecast, the total number of beds that are in the program currently is 468 beds. But in terms of what's needed in the immediate future, and we're going to talk about having housing units that are either built or phased in, if you average those numbers out by the 40-45 year, it's going to be closer to population of 400 inmates in the jail. The program is for a 468-bed jail, and actually the support core is programmed for about 500 inmates. When I say support core, kitchen, the intake area, things that you don't want to have to expand, and the kitchen that serves 400 is not very different than the kitchen that serves 500. So you could even add beds beyond the 468 kind of high-level forecasts. That's through the year of 2045 or 2050. But initial construction, and depending, you've got a few years to see if anything will change within the criminal justice system, if maybe the population can come down by implementing just pretrial screening alone. I will add examples in the report about how that has brought populations down by screening and saying, okay, you don't have to be in jail, but you're going to go on a monitor and you need to appear in court. And the failure to appear rate drastically changed, and the major cost savings as a result of that. So that's just one item that could be put off any more beds to be added in the future. In terms of so now the next slide is to look at basically the jail that is in the program, 468 beds, and looking at what percent is administrative and disciplinary segregation, kind of the problem makers in a jail. And then high security, medium, minimum, and then there's special categories like females and juveniles, because juveniles waive to the adult court. It's a small number, but they need to be housed separately. And then finally, some specialized housing for medical and mental health. And so the program as developed, I'm just going to show you sort of a graphic on page 20 and 21, that one of the principles of the new jail is that, and it was really important to Commander Bradshaw, that you have to plan, and if you don't get the staff, that it will be indirect supervision. However, and it's, research has been shown that particularly in some of the housing units, it's really important to also have staff in the housing units, what's called direct supervision. But the model that this is based on is to say, if there isn't enough staff to have everybody in the housing units, here is how supervision will be done indirectly at a minimum. And the way that will be done is there's basically 4 housing clusters. And the first cluster will have male administrative segregation in single cells, male protective custody. They can be in double cells or protective custody, not because they've done something, but because they might get hurt in the jail or whatever. So those are double cell. Male maximum custody, and there's 2 of those units at 32. So that first housing cluster, somebody will always be a housing control officer, and these 4 red dots that you see, somebody will be there at every shift 365 days a year. And then hopefully you will also have staff that will be in the housing units, or at least roaming around the housing units. But this way you can directly observe what's going on in the housing units. The second one will be what's the male medium minimum custody. And that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 48-bed units, all double celled. And even the minimum will have, they've got some work release that will be in there that help work in the jail. But that will be a total of 192 beds at that housing cluster. And again, there would be always somebody, a housing control officer would be able to visually look into the housing units, and there will hopefully be some roamers that can go in and out of the housing units. But the philosophy or the overriding thing is that we have to know we can at least supervise it with indirect supervision. So this is a plan that eventually the architect will draw, a plan that will be similar to this, that you'll be able to have that observation. The other, on the next page, the other housing control area 3 is much smaller. It's only 88 beds will be supervised, because that's a bunch of little small, kind of a female medium minimum medium will be 48 double cell. But then there'll be a female special custody housing unit that will have some single cells and also some maximum custody double cells. But that's going to be more for if it's like an administrative segregation female that's really difficult to have in the population. So that's like a special housing unit for females. But the biggest one, 48 beds, will be in medium minimum. Then the bottom shows a lot of breakup of a very small 16-bed unit for your juveniles that are in the facility that have been waived to the adult court, because you have to separate. They've got to have total sight and sound separation from the adult. And then you've got male beds, female beds, and you're going to still have some segregation, some youth that for some period of time might need to be in the special single cells. And then also you need to have a dedicated classroom, because even if they're in jail, they still fall under the federal guideline of requiring 5.5 hours a day of academic education. So it makes sense to have the classroom there in the housing unit as opposed to moving them to a central program space. And the last cluster at 60 beds, which is also smaller because these are more specialized units, would have 12 single beds of intake housing. And then the majority of the beds, the other 48 beds, will be a medical mental health unit. That will be a combination of some double beds, but also quite a few single cells. And at that you see, while this has not been laid out, it's really important that it's near the medical mental health and clinic or the jail, but there will be some dedicated staff that would need to actually work in that housing unit, because that's going to be the most serious mental health population and population with other medical needs. Okay, well, the next slide is going to show you the numbers, but you're probably going to have to look at your paper. It's what this jail of 468 beds, and we can talk about phasing some housing, initial construction versus some that's dotted line in the future, is about almost 205,000 building gross square feet. And that does include, again, an ERC courtroom and an initial appearance courtroom. So everything in the jail, from the public lobby to administration to courts, security operations, all the staff services, central control, the housing control rooms, intake, transfer, and release, and then inmate programs, because we do have some multi-purpose rooms to try to do some kind of programming when they're in the jail. And then obviously the required medical services, food service, laundry, maintenance and storage, and then finally that same breakdown of inmate housing, because it's not just every jail cell's the same. It's really clustered in a way that the right populations would be in the same area. And that all comes up to a total building gross of rounded up 205,000 building gross square feet. And now in a minute, when Gary and Adam are going to go through some of the concepts, that doesn't include the parking space and some other outdoor area, maintenance vehicles, service roads. That's just the building. So,
couple questions. So where do you get this square feet per from? Is there like a national sort of standard, a mill standard, or not mill standard, but
no. What I did, again, because I've been doing this for so many years and I'm well aware, when we had a meeting with the Technical Advisory Committee, I went through all of the American Correctional Association standards, which basically most states have implemented that. So if you have a lawsuit or something, if you're ACA accredited, and all of the physical space standards says how big a cell should be, how many square feet of kitchen space you need. I'm trying to remember the required for medical. I also looked at the National Commission on Correctional Health Care that dictates standards about what's needed. So for many of those spaces, it's American Correctional Association standards that dictates how many square feet. Even for recreation space, it says 15 square feet.
This just jumps out at me, right? So public lobby, right? You got 2,600 square feet. So that lobby right there is 1,500.
Mhm.
So it's almost twice the size of that lobby. That seems like an awful big lobby for a jail.
Well, in the lobby, so we would have to go through that line by line. I'm going to send the report.
Oh, okay.
It's not just a lobby like that. What it also includes, because one of the reports I read, and it's true that there's very limited access to attorneys visiting with clients. So the way I have it in the public lobby, there's two things going on. First of all, there's some staff that would be in that lobby with community transition planning, transit reentry and transition release planning, and that's a good place to have it.
It's not just a lobby.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
an office
Right.
space.
Right.
Sort of.
No, it's a lobby, but it's also a place where the public side, like attorneys, or let's say, 2 days a week, a mental health professional will come in and will meet with inmates that are being released. Instead of having things in the higher cost inside security, those kinds of things that will help transition people back to the community, or let community providers come in, attorneys come in where they can come on this side and they're directed through a booth on the jail secure side. So there's many spaces there's a whole space table. This is a summary of that. And
Yeah, it's
I don't-
many different
yeah,
rooms.
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I didn't bring the whole space program with me, but I can, yeah.
Wow, that's a huge lobby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not.
It's a department.
Okay.
Yeah. These are kind of, the summary here is trying to say that I am, I call that
And
public lobby
you know-
because it's the public side. It's where public's coming in.
The administration square footage, 3,100 square feet. That's a lot for, how many people do you think you're going to be? And again, I look at this building, right? And how many people are in this building, right? This building, that backside there, that's only somewhere around 2,500 square feet back here. So, I mean, that's more administrative space than we have in the back of this building.
How many,
So that's what-
how many staff are,
I don't
Well,
know what's back there.
I guess what we should
15.
do is,
I'm just trying to imagine in my brain here. So just so you're aware, I'm Mr. Bare Bones. What do we need? What is required? Because I care about how much it's going to cost the taxpayers, number one, right? So square footage drives cost. That is,
Yeah.
the driver. So reducing square footage is a big deal, right? So keeping the square footage to the absolute minimum necessary should be the driving factor,
it should be.
right? So that's what I'm getting at. So I'm trying to understand why. To me, these seem like big numbers for certain things, and I just need to understand why they're that big. And if there's a logical reason, then that's fine.
Well, there's also a metric that I use when I complete a program. I backed out the courts and say, how many square feet is this per inmate for a 468-bed jail? And it's a little bit less than 400 square feet. So it's right on target. American Correctional, if you do the pony training and stuff, it used to be just plan on 500 square foot per inmate. That's what it's going to come out to.
Okay.
We've got it more efficient in this program.
Okay.
And I mean, the program, as you can imagine, is like 40 pages, and you will be able to review it because it will be in the draft program. But in the interest of time, I don't have the whole
So what
program.
about larger housing units instead of like 2 inmates per cell? What about, like a barrack style for minor offenders, DUIs, people that aren't there, where you could put 20 of them in like a bay?
Right.
Yeah.
And some jails I've worked on over the years have done that.
Uh-huh.
And many jails regret that they did that. Again, if you look at who's in jail, there's a whole host of other issues besides whatever their low-level crime is. And it's very difficult to manage a wide open dormitory. I mean, you guys can say what your findings have been, but people are moving away from that double cell and, 2 cells, 2 bunks on the floor, not a bunk bed. That's the requirement. That's the space standards that I use, and it's my recommendation. Now, when I've done like a work release facility where it's just, off the campus of a jail, I have done some, smaller, like a 6-bed dorm. But for a jail population, and to be able to manage them safely, knowing that there's underlying some critical issues besides the criminal activity of, other mental health and other issues, medical and mental health issues, I don't have any dormitory space in this jail program. So that's
Crosby.
Yeah, I worked at juvenile corrections and there's 40 juvies in one bay and they beat the heck out of each other all night.
I just redid a juvenile facility in Nebraska that had open bay dormitory,
Okay.
40 beds, and they had so many incidents, and also on staff. And then you start talking about time off for, I mean, I can add some research about that, and there are some places that have done it.
Well, I'm picking your brain
It
because,
does- yeah, yeah.
you build jails.
Yeah.
I don't build jails, so.
Well, I don't
The
build them.
factors
I-
of gang affiliation or not. There's no-
You're just not going to have the flexibility to, and I have to say that for this jail, in terms of single cell versus double cell, the vast majority of them are double cell. So they're still, but with proper classification, you still will put 2 people in a closed room.
Well, that's the
But
sheriff's department will manage
Yeah.
who gets assigned with what.
But I'm just saying, there's not a lot of individual, obviously for the disciplinary seg, because it's virtually impossible to have two people in that cell, which because your jail is so outdated and undersized right now.
Right.
I'm sure there are incidents where you want to figure out who this person who's acting out or a bad actor, I shouldn't say that, but someone that's really having a hard time, you need to have some single cells to put those people into. But the majority of, if you add up the percentage of double occupancy versus single, it's primarily double occupancy cells, but no dormitory. So, that might be an issue to keep thinking about.
Can I toss something?
Sure, Phil.
So just the study that the Chin and DLR are completing is what is your preliminary study. This is the starting point of your jail project. And it provides you an upper limit, hopefully, of what you'll see. As you go through your design process with future consultants, architects, you will narrow that down based on things like you just mentioned, costs, because costs are a real thing. This is looking at the upper limit of what you would need to accommodate this population. But as you actually get into deciding a site, and you start looking at the individual, the specific design, that's where you can try to reduce the size and cost of this.
I got a lot of good stuff in here with regard to reducing the daily population, right? So Kathleen and I were talking about setting up a mental health facility in the county somewhere to offload some of the mental health issues in the jail and nonviolent mental health type and substance abuse type stuff.
You can actually do it adjacent to the facility,
Which is a lot cheaper than in a jail.
Which has to be in Douglas area.
Yeah.
So just to let you know, this is where I stand.
Okay.
And I'm
So I
going to be
just
on
wanted to
state.
point out that
Right.
you're right about, you should be looking at cost because you will be in the future.
Sure.
Because as you go through design, that's really where you start narrowing.
There's some good nuggets in here about reducing and, talking with the county attorney about deferrals, some other way to keep people out of jail.
Yep.
And,
I'll turn it back. I
got
But
that's some of it. And then, I think I kind of get what these, because you and I had talked about the modular design and that's kind of what you guys got here, this thing where you have a pod and you got 4 cell blocks off the pod. They seem to me though, again, I'm biased because I went and toured the prison up in Florence and it's big, right? The pod's up there, so I'm looking at these and they're like 48 populations, where the one up in Florence is like 160 or something. That's what, so I'm just looking at, this seems very.
Well, that's a prison.
I know it's a prison.
Yeah.
I caveated that last time when I talked to Phil.
Hey, you know who you have when you get in prison. Everyone coming off the street in the jail.
Right, but I'm trying to, and again, this will be later when we talk about it with architects. Efficiency is a big driver because maintenance and operation are big cost drivers after the jail is built.
Yeah.
So maximizing the deputies, the corrections officers' staff that are in there so that we can automate as much of this jail as possible to keep the number of deputies down. That's a big cost driver for the long-term cost.
Well, but however, there is very much evidence-based research that the human interaction factor, because some of the scariest jails I've ever been in is where there is literally no one's even going through the housing unit. So while the plan for this jail and the way it's the concept, the planning study is to have those housing pods so you can know you always at least got the supervision indirect. But ideally, there would be some staff.
Yeah, a guy sitting behind the glass in each of these.
Right. That's what that assumes. The housing control, they don't leave.
Right.
They stay there because 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that's your indirect supervision. But a staffing plan should also have, particularly in some of the high, like the mental health unit, it's not going to do good just to have somebody looking down. There needs to be some direct supervision staff also in some of those housing.
One other question. You mentioned about the ACA, what is it, the American
Correctional Association.
Is there, when you build this new jail facility, is there a way that they would be involved to make sure that that jail would never become like the jail that we have now? Because for some reason I was thinking, how did not we get cited with a whole lot of violations when it came to that population being under those circumstances, right? So prevent
Mhm.
Hopefully, Board of Supervisors will be on top of it every year. I think you got to do a walkthrough every year to
Yeah.
make sure that everything is staying up to.
Part of the certification process.
Right. So this jail would then become certified.
Well,
ACA accreditation.
Yeah.
the standards are followed by ACA, but you would have to decide that you want it to be an accredited jail. There's many jails that aren't accredited. You go through ACA.
Do whatever you want, right? Or not.
Right, I've started jail plan before and I say, do you want to be ACA accredited? And they're like, no, we haven't been and we don't care. However, it makes sense to be accredited by the American Correctional Association because if there was something to happen, that's the first line of defense to say that you followed the standards. And by the way, there's like 498 standards and some of them are like how hot the water should be or you should have people filing papers. The ones that are really inmate related or space related, it doesn't make sense to plan a new jail where you aren't following ACA accreditation. But you have to decide if you want that accreditation. You contact ACA, they send in an accreditation person, they tour, they say if something's wrong or they cite you for this or that, you correct it, and you're accredited.
Corrected in
Yeah.
a sense, in a due time or in
Yeah.
a diligent way in which it doesn't cost you hundreds and hundreds of thousands down the road, right?
Exactly.
Right, right,
Exactly.
right.
Chairman
I can't
Antonelli?
imagine anyone, I know,
I'm sorry, Mr. Bradshaw, Deputy.
Yes,
Commander Bradshaw.
Thank you. Just wanted to point out that there's a lot of accreditation organizations. So you have American Detention Association, American Correctional Association, National Institute for Jail Operations. So there's also a set of standards that is just
Healthcare.
established for Arizona. So you choose what what works best. In Arizona, the best practice is to use National Institute of Jail Operations. They help develop the standards for Arizona. And we are in majority in compliance with that. The only reason we haven't been accredited is because of the fiscal plant. So that we haven't pushed accreditation for that because we can't be in compliance with the building.
Well, I'll tell you right now, it's the national, what did he say? I'm sorry.
Jail.
That it says we're in compliance now. That's not a good vote for me because
No.
I mean, then we wouldn't need to build a new jail because we would have been going with.
So with our policies, with our current policies, our policies are in compliance. But some of our practices, because of the way the building was designed or because of the space and the problems with the jail, we will never be accredited.
Ms. Gillen, with regard to ASIP, do we know if ASIP recommends one?
ACE.
The insurance company?
County insurance pool.
Oh,
I don't know. I can. Commander Bradshaw, are you aware if ASIP has an opinion on which standard?
Yes, ASIP also worked with the National Institute for Jail Operations to develop the standards, and they actually paid that company to write standards for the state of Arizona.
Okay, no.
And the reason I use American Correctional Association standards in this planning phase is that whenever I have worked, again, in my 43 years, most states, if they have state standards, they've just adopted the ACA standards or other ones. It's kind of the, I don't know, say goalpost, because they're like, Commander,
Is there something that you have that shows the differences for each of those accreditation agencies and what the requirements are to meet the accreditation?
I could develop.
Out of curiosity.
Because
that's what
I
I
use
think
the American
you're-
Correctional Association
you
standards because when if a jail has been sued or litigated, whatever, that is what it's the national standard. In most states, it's a variation, maybe a little less than that. So I say at the planning phase, go with the standards for how big the rooms need to be, how many square feet of recreation space, how many, and I also use National Commission on Correctional Healthcare because we know so much now, which wasn't an issue maybe 20 or 30 years ago, but how much we need to look at medical and mental health standards in a jail because that's your population.
Right.
And I would say sometimes it's balanced too, because there's two major portions of the ACA. There's the operations, and then there's what they call a physical plant. Okay, so ideally you want to meet both of those, but in some cases you can cover a physical plant deficiency with operations. So they work with you to work through that.
Like they're doing now with the fire alarm and the having bodies.
Well, of all their standards,
There's
I
ways
think
to.
there's only 30 that are mandatory standards. There's a whole book of, but they will go through that, and then if it's to be accredited, and if you're missing on the mandatory ones, you'll get hit if they'll mention the non-mandatory because it just makes for. This is a compilation of standards. As long as jails, I think they started American Correctional Association 50 or 60 years ago. So, and they are constantly updating the manual on the,
It's no
Square footage.
hardship either on the design of a jail. Any jail that we've worked on in the past 30 years has met ACA standards.
And to me,
So
that
it's,
just keeps
it's not
future
a,
board of supervisors and the future sheriff department all
of course.
on
You're out of-
above line,
Yeah,
that
yes.
nothing gets to this point.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
there's
I
nothing
would-
unreasonable about those standards. It's just a sort of common sense too.
Right.
You know, occasionally we'll have a client who wants to modify one standard in that, and then they can get an exception. And you still meet the overall standard.
Okay.
So,
But at this phase, if it's not been designed, the square footage in here, I am complying with all the physical plant standards and square footages.
and then everything in here we can modify, we can reduce. You know, the cell size is kind of the biggest part of the standard. Cell, day room, recreation, toilets, showers. That's kind of the bulk of it. But as far as administration and lobby, that's not really falling under standards.
That's not a standard.
So that we can tighten up when we always do. Every project is under fiscal constraint, so we always tighten it up.
You leave a management reserve in there.
No, this is a really important point that you made a comment about, that making sure that everything's tight and, you know, you got a good program that's not wasting space, which I agree with 100%.
Let's go through
At this point of the planning process, I don't know what your site is. I don't.
Yeah, I got you.
And so,
Well,
and I
drive
would-
to the site.
yeah.
Because
Well,
you're
yeah,
going to have the square footage of
Right,
everything in order to.
And then when we get down to it, for example, there might be a courtroom, and let's say that you're going to decide to locate it in Sierra Vista. Well, maybe you only need, you know, that courtroom, if maybe one less courtroom could be in the court program that I haven't presented yet, but or maybe something could be shaved off because now you're going to locate it a certain place. When you go to the next round, you don't want to find out that I was 10,000 or 20,000 square feet short. When things get laid out side by side, if there could be some economy or some ways to shave
Space
space.
kids too,
Right.
so that'll help you.
Yeah, but let's try
Yeah, I
to.
mean, because look, you got 6,800 square feet for courtrooms in there, in the jail too. That's a lot.
That's like the whole court set, though.
Mhm.
The actual.
Oh, that's for the whole, but you have a whole nother section here for that.
No, the
No.
the courtroom will be typically 1,800 square feet, but then you've got the kind of the vestibule and you've got the attorney meeting rooms, and so that's kind of all adds up. But the courtroom is like 1,800, 2,000, which is
Yep.
very standard.
Yeah.
Well, but there's court holding.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's a jury box, there's waiting, there's other areas, so it's not just one courtroom. And that summary, that's what I'm saying. This is the summary page, and in the draft report, you'll get the line by line program. You can go through that. All right. Well, so that's for the jail. The next, real quick, just to summarize, for the Cochise County, if the sheriff wherever you're going to locate it, and if the sheriff office was then going to locate next to it, or at least site planning to say you would have that ability to do it in the future, the square footage on that, and again, this is projected staff out through 2040, would be 57,000 square feet. And then the square footage for the courts, and you can see all the components of the court, from the public lobby, meeting space, maintenance, building security, all the way through, 4 superior courtrooms. That could be reduced to 3 if you decide you are going to build a jail and you're going to have an ERC court, and if somebody could be permanently assigned to that. You would only, because basically you have 6 courts now, and there's no population estimate that says you need to have additional courts. I've put it in this court program because I don't know if you're ever going to do this building, or if you do it and you've already built a jail and it's got an ERC, a full superior court, you could deduct that. But since I don't know, that's why I'm trying to say that could something be shaved depending on location, and or if you're going to add these other components like the court and the sheriff, maybe there could be some reduction in the amount of square footage. But the total building square footage for the court is 141, almost 142,000 square feet for the court. And that would include everything from the courtrooms, meeting space, secure holding, and all the other clerk of court, county attorney. Now, it doesn't assume that every small location that you've got like a couple of people in Wilcox that do probation. You know, this would be the main courthouse for the county. And you would still have some outposts in the more remote areas. Got a couple of staff that are doing probation, or the clerk of court, for example, has like 1 or 2 staff, I think, in Wilcox and 1 in Douglas, just so that citizens can come in and it's more convenient. So depending on when you're located, maybe we could reduce some of the staff in the court. But these 3 programs represent forecasted into the future jail, court, and sheriff with projected staff, and depending on where we're located, maybe a little square footage.
Right, now, so that's what I'm saying, that it drives the square footage for site selection. Yeah.
Speaking of,
Brings us to that point.
Well, site selection.
all right, next slide, please. Next one. So, we kind of did a very high level review of the site selection. Again, very high level. And at the end of this part of the presentation, there is a scorecard that we're going to ask you to kind of your input on as far as location. But some of the factors of site selection are up on top. Utilities, of course. Are there utilities? Topographic variations. Some sites are level, some are not. Some have quite a bit of topo. Do you own the land? Existing buildings to reuse, like the Bisbee site, the current jail site, population centers, Sierra Vista, labor force, also maybe Sierra Vista or wherever the labor is.
Douglas for the jail.
Site access, and relationship with other judicial functions. So these are just some of the factors. So with that, we started going through the sites. And before we go through kind of the site discussion, back up, yep, right there. So the diagram, this is a very high level diagram of a jail. You can see the red, that is the support area, that is the kitchen, laundry, intake, medical, lobby, all kind of support area. And the blue and the green are the housing units. These are basically the 4 clusters that we kind of diagrammed earlier, but it's, again, a high level. Modern jails are very efficient. We do a lot with indirect and borrowed light. So we're able to kind of make these jails quite compact and energy efficient, staff efficient. The smaller the jail, the more efficient it is for staff as well. So that's a diagram of the housing, the blue and the green, and the darker gray is the parking, the public staff parking, as well as the secure access to the vehicle sally port for intake, as well as some secure parking, that type of thing. So that's kind of the bolder colors on that diagram. And then you can see at the front of the red bar is the light color brown, which is possibly the future courthouse. I know that this is, we're thinking a master plan here, but we wanted to show kind of a footprint for a courthouse. While the jail is all single level, the courthouse could be 2 to 3 levels. Multiple levels is efficient for a courthouse. But the real big efficiency of having the courthouse next to the jail is moving inmates, of course. You don't have to drive them around. You just walk them in and out. And that's a huge operational expense to move inmates. And then the lavender color is the future sheriff's building, possibly, also 2-story. And then the light gray is parking. So altogether, including ability to expand not only the jail, but the courthouse, the sheriff's, and the parking, we're figuring about 40 acres, 42 acres. So this first slide here is at Benson. All these sites have plenty of room. Whether or not the county owns them or partially owns them, it's another story, but this is Benson. And then if you go to the next slide, we basically took that same diagram and we applied it to each side. We're not designing the jail. We're just kind of scaling the sites. So this is Tombstone. It's right at the intersection of Davis Road and with the road we came in and which is Davis and what? It's right at that intersection. Yeah. And so so again, 42 acres, that's a flat site. We saw that, so topography is not an issue there. Next site, Sierra Vista. Once again, that seems to be a relatively flat site. The advantage of this is, whenever a jail is really good to have 2 main roads connecting to a jail. You never want to back yourself into a corner with a jail. You want to have, like, if your main entrance is blocked, that you have a secondary entrance off of the separate road. So that's something to look for. And so that this site happens to do that. It's not like we can't get the other sites to do that as well, but this one. So that's Sierra Vista. The next one is Douglas. Douglas also has good access, 2 roads, main roads. I think there's a little bit more topography here on this site. But again, there's quite a bit of room there, and we could also look at, different.
Can I ask you a
areas.
question? Is
Sure.
this near the prison or where?
Yes.
Yes,
It's near the airport.
So
Yeah,
it's near BDI, it's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
like north of it?
yes.
Just
The
on.
prison's just north of
Right,
us. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I
We
understand what you're talking about.
we pulled it down towards the intersection a little bit closer than the prison, just to give it a little more frontage on the main street.
Yeah.
If you ever did build a courthouse
Okay.
there. But again, these are just really high level views. And then the next one is right here next door, Bisbee Melody Lane. It's, flat site, relatively flat site. Here you could borrow off of Melody Lane to provide you secondary access to the jail. So also a very viable location. And then the final 3 are looking back at the existing jail. This is the most challenging of the sites. You can see there's the existing jail and sheriff's building. So we looked here to the west side. And what we're showing here is, the single level support area, but in the housing, we stacked it. We can stack the housing. That's done all the time, where you go 2 housing units tall. So because it's a constricted site, there's just not a lot of room there. There is topography, but we still allowed enough room for a future courthouse at that site. And the advantage of this site is that we can expand on the existing sheriff's building, use the existing sheriff's building, expand on it. They can use the training facility, the shooting range, that type of thing. So there's a distinct advantage here. And then we did multiples for this site because there's many different ways of looking at it. So this is an idea of where we build a new jail on the west side of the sheriff's building. And that would put all the housing on one level, still allow future expansion for housing, the new jail support, new parking, new secure parking, and so on and so forth. Expand the existing sheriff's building as needed. And then in the future, you demolish the existing jail and build possibly a new courthouse. It's just this is long range master plan we're talking. Then you build a new courthouse and then you have parking. So in that sense, that site would work. But the disadvantage is that you have a new jail across the parking lot from a new courthouse. And so you lose that kind of immediacy that's nice about having a courthouse connected to a jail, even though it might be years away, of course. So the last one we have here is, well, why don't we look at the east side of the site and build a new jail on the east side? Again, if there's topography there, there's other considerations, but at least if there is traction on building a new courthouse someday where the current jail is, there could be a closer connection. And then, of course, there's associated parking. Again, the sheriff keeps their facility. They can expand it. They have their training facility behind it. So there's some advantages there as well. So again, sum it up, these are real high level. We're not trying to design anything that, everything is just a high level kind of overview to get a sense of how big of a site we would need. And then ultimately, we'd leave it, we can help you with this, but we've started to develop a scorecard on what you think is, the merits of each site. Of course, utilities, availability, and ownership. Those are all factors that kind of would relate to a scoring of each site. So that's the initial site review. That this is not an architectural design. This is just a test fit. Once the program is done, of course, then when the architects get a hold of it, which we hope we are the architects, then we will look at kind of fine tuning all those spaces and making it work not only fiscally for the county but also operationally for the sheriff's office.
So phase 1 converting from
conclude their presentation. So this is a planning study. I kind of wanted to comment about how you acquire services like this. You go through a process that's delineated in state law and statute. And what Gary, Mr. Rattel was referring to is some of the next steps as you conclude this study in the next months. This is just the planning study. As you move forward with, design and construction, you'll go through a process of selecting those consultants for you. We've gone through a process with your procurement department on an owner's representative services contract to put in front of you. That's a firm that would act as what I call a fiduciary for you, basically help you manage the design and construction from start to finish after concluding this study. So that's, I just wanted to bring that up that, when you go through that, and as Mr. Rattel mentioned about the DLR will obviously put in for any services in the future, that'll go through a selection process that the board will be involved with and your county staff will be involved with. But you're at a point right now where I see this as you now have a blueprint for what you could start with. And as you go through and decide your site, and you then start to look at, do you need to acquire the site? Because I think you own EDI, you own property there. I believe the Sierra Vista site you own, and I believe the Bisbee site and existing you own. The other sites, I could not find ownership from the county. It's privately owned, is my research. So I think these are the things as you move forward, that as you move forward with design construction, you'll be able to make further decisions on location. It's a board decision on where you locate it. And as you go through design, you'll try to maximize your, not minimize or maximize, but refine your square footage as you go through the design. That's what you typically do as you go through design. You're looking at costs, you're weighing to make sure you can accommodate what you want for the amount of money that you can afford. So that's kind of my parting comments.
One of these scorecards is missing. One factor that I think is really important is to the people of District 2 who, this has been a county seat for, I don't know, since the beginning of district, Cochise County.
And Tombstone was prior, which is also in District 2.
Well, yeah. So
So there you go.
but I know that you cannot put this, there's a real, in District 2, I don't know about 1 or 3, there's a real feeling we're not going to lose anything else to Sierra Vista. You're not taking our county fair, you're not taking our jail, you're not taking our courts, you're not taking our county seat. Okay, so this is just something as being the supervisor for District 2. I'm going to die on this one.
I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that too. But again, I'm looking at a couple of these sites and I'm looking at other sites, and I talked to Senator Gowan. There's funding for road construction, some support for the jail if we want to do road improvements. I mean, there's some other things we got to look at. I think we really need to sit down with Phil and maybe.
And I understand transportation costs, but you can't put all your eggs in one economic basket at one city where you perceive that that's where always your growth can be. Let me remind everyone that Douglas, until the pit closed, was the third largest city in Arizona. Yeah. So all this based on perception on what can happen in the future. Who knows? Maybe the port of entry will bring Douglas back to those days when we got 35,000 people, we got more crime. I mean, we want to build mental hospitals. So when you're doing projections of what could be in the future, there's a lot of things that I didn't hear as part of that projection. So I'm just, for my audience out there, I'm just letting you know. That's what I'm trying to.
And this is a good point. I have a couple comments that would be, this is ultimately the board decision. They're giving you good information on any sites moving forward with a jail project. And then they're showing you, can it also accommodate future planned construction should the board or county need it in the future. You ultimately get to make the decision on, do you not worry about that? Do you just go primarily with the jail project? This is all up to the board, but it's our responsibility to make sure you have the best information to make those decisions.
So Phil, how deep are we going to go on the site selection stuff? I mean, so I want to know, here's what I'm getting. So when you talk about utilities, right? So you look, let's just say the Tombstone one right off of Davis Road, right? How far are we from the sewage treatment plant? How far are we from the,
So those are things that they'll answer and come back.
what is the cost to drive a sewer line to the sewage treatment plant? What is the cost to run power lines to the utilities or the power line? I'm looking at land acquisition costs. I mean, these are the drivers for site selection for me. I know Ms. Gomez has got others, but I'm really looking at the driving costs per site.
And,
So,
You take a job, you know where your job
and
is.
you're going to get some information from these consultants
Okay.
on the site selection and the ranking of it, and approximate cost of a facility and operational costs. You're going to get a cost estimate. Then you need to move forward. You need to conclude this study, which will conclude in May, by the way. I mean, we are in a trajectory to complete this study. And then you'll move forward with the information you had and make those final decisions. That's the way I look at it, is you then have the time to evaluate the work they've done, the costs for the facility, and we can get you all the information from them on where utilities are located, and you can make a decision on it.
well, the other thing is the customers, right? The customers are the sheriff's office, the cities that are going to be bringing detainees. What's the word we use?
That's good.
Well, they're yet to be adjudicated, so you don't want to.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is, so when I was on the board, the jail citizens advisory board, I did a rudimentary sort of heat map for deputy travel to hospitals, to other jails. I did one for how many times the Sierra Vista Police Department's got to go back and forth, and I saw something really, and I'll have to go try to find it, but it was really amazing to see how inefficient where the current jail is right now compared to the traffic that needs to support that jail. Right, so that's the other thing I want to see for site selection. For example, Sierra Vista, is, as we've seen in the data provided, is the biggest customer next to the sheriff's office. Right, sheriff's office is coming from all over the county. But for example, somewhere where these guys, it's a straight shot down Charleston Road to Tombstone, or it's a straight shot up 90, or a straight shot down 80 for those guys, or up to 82 and straight down 82, helps the Sierra Vista Police Department and the city and the taxpayers, because the taxpayers in Sierra Vista are still paying county taxes. All right, they're paying the sales tax, they're paying property tax. That's what I'm saying. So you can't just, no offense to, you just can't throw Sierra Vista off of the map, because they are a driver here. So that data, right? I got you.
Again, this is not a decision.
But what I'm trying to convey to Ms. Chin and her team, this is what, when we come to site select, now the big nugget here is we need 42 acres of land is the running nugget. So I will be tonight on my Arizona Hunt Maps app, walking out 42 acre parcels all over Arizona in District 2. But I'm just saying that, for example, if we were to get funding to improve Charleston Road and pave that road so that Sierra Vista has a straight shot to Tombstone down, so the cops in Sierra Vista cut their time back and forth to the jail literally in half per police officer to transport an inmate to the jail. The other side of that equation is if the jail has to take a guy to the hospital to get down to what's the hospital? Canyon Vista. It's a straight shot down Charleston, then down. So that's what I'm looking at for site selection, and that's the land acquisition isn't really that big of a deal. This land is relatively cheap in Cochise County. I mean, it's the ancillary costs, the utility costs, the transportation costs, the logistical costs, like the lady I spoke to that has the food service contract for the current jail. She has to cross load into smaller trucks. It's all the mileage all that we pay for, the taxpayers pay for.
But I have to say that in these projections that you're making them based on certain perceived ideas. Whereas if we do the job that we want to do in building an economic corridor where you have a port of entry and you've got, the Cochise County, this is a hub for border control and fighting the cartel, then those perceptions may change on what is going to be the basis of the future.
So I got you, but you got to think of the whole county.
And then think of it, Trump gets his wish, we won't be paying that much more in gas, right? We're going to have so much gas available.
You got the whole county. You got cops coming from Wilcox.
And I've got people who live in Douglas
I
and
got
visit
you.
and work at that jail.
So this is the best discussion I've heard by the Board of Supervisors on
what
the
we wanna hear.
location of a jail yet.
Well, that's the start, right? The start is trying to figure out where we're going to put this thing because that drives everything else. That drives the design, that drives, so.
And you
Can't design
mentioned
it, you don't
utility
know where it's
costs.
going.
One of the biggest errors I ever saw and worked was having your own packaged sewage plant
Yeah.
to have to operate and maintain as part of your jail.
I'm not.
That's one right in
These are the
Douglas.
things that when you're looking at this, again, this is for another day. I know you have a 2:30.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank Chin and DLR for coming in and
Right.
doing a great job.
There's some good data in here that maybe too much
More to
for me.
come, but,
Well, you're going to see a lot. You should have seen the presentations from the technical advisory committee that you are. My job will be to make sure we continue to get the information to you, bring a final presentation back.
After you've had the report to
Yeah.
read through.
You'll get a report to review, have a final presentation by Chin. But in the meantime, I do want some input from the board on, do you want to entertain having a firm that is your owner's representative to come on and discuss moving forward? That's the next step if you want to move forward with design and construction. So that's something we can talk about.
Yeah, we got to get the chickens and eggs lined up. I got to know which comes first. What the sequential events, like a master phasing schedule for, how that informs the next decision.
That's actually what that firm would be doing.
Right. Well, then that's fine. But we can have that for another work session. But I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to grab is basically the a Gantt chart of how everything flows into everything. All the tasks are related to get to
The primary ones that right now I see that you have to decide, you conclude this study, you have to decide on where you are for a new site, because then you have to begin acquisition. Acquisition can occur during design. You have to acquire it prior to starting construction. You don't ever want to do that.
Yeah. Got there. No, but
I've seen that happen. But that's what I'm saying is these are the sequential things on top of my head. But yes, there's a process you'll go through. But the ultimate part is you just had a professional firm come on and do a planning study, and it does conclude. The next step is, do you want to move forward with design and construction? We can help you move forward with that.
Thank you.
If that's your desire.
All right. Any other questions? Mr. Crosby.
I want with friend.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A big hero in her business.
Yeah. Right.
She definitely got this.
Well, no, I believe in them.
No, we got you. We got you. But I'm just looking at, there's other factors because you got all these other municipalities.
Change your mind. You tell me what
All
those
right.
factors are.
All right.
All
All right.
Much more criteria to that.
So, any other comments? No, sir. No, sir. Any other comments? All right. Phil, do you have any other comments?
No, sir, Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much for your time today.
All right. Well, the next meeting will be in 2 minutes. It will be a discussion for basically some issues related to the TACA folks. I'm trying to find out where it is on my agenda here. Is that it? Oh, yeah, the Trace Alamos Community Alliance is going to be in. So with that, we are adjourned from this jail meeting.